Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead. NewEnglandTake.com. Please be sure to check out the Substack over there. Great way to support the show and get every episode in your inbox. Getting a whole bunch of followers of late, which is awesome. Thank you, WKXL, for picking up the show every Saturday, 8:30 a.m., right before Facing the Future, and GraniteGrock.com and Concord TV also. So be sure to support all these local outlets. Very important to continue to support local media here in the state. Before we start, I do want to give a big shout out to PorcupineCoffeeRoasting.com, a private membership organization, locally roasted specialty coffee here in New Hampshire. NE Take for 15% off your order. I'm loving it. I drink it every morning the last couple months since I started this partnership, and I am very happy. All right. This week, excited to be joined for the first time by Brian Westnedge. He's the Director of Alliances and Partnerships at Sift. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, AJ. Great to be with you.
So, a little bit, give the elevator pitch. What's Sift? Great name.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are a cybersecurity company. We help our customers implement kind of domain and brand protection. So we help companies protect themselves against email impersonation attacks, cousin lookalike domain attacks, and other attacks that try to take advantage of infrastructure weaknesses and other things. We've been in business about 9 years, and I've been with the company about 5. So thank you cool. For including me in the podcast today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, cybersecurity is absolutely essential. I've got a background working in IT, working with insurance, and all sorts of things of that nature, and it's essential. I don't care what size your business is. You people hear all the headlines like, "Oh, IBM such and such got attacked by this or that international ring of whatever," and there's ransomware and all sorts of things of that nature. But guess what? Nowadays, everyone's connected to the internet. If you somehow get hacked, you got to think about what sort of things you have at a bare bones on your systems. And if you're not taking basic steps, it could cause serious issues.
Yeah, I think, and it's not just, I think you might have a tendency to assume that these attacks only target large enterprises. And from my experience, that's not the case. And even from personal experience with a couple of family members who operate small businesses, they've been targeted just as much as the big guys. So originally the idea is, hey, you go where the money is, right? So you attack a bank or, a credit card company or something like that. But the reality is a lot of larger institutions have done a pretty good job of shoring up their defenses, and the attackers will kind of go potentially where the weaknesses are. And sometimes small businesses have so many things to worry about, and obviously they might be outsourcing their IT and security to a managed services provider, so might not be top of mind, and obviously wouldn't expect your average small business owner to necessarily be up to date on all the current email security protocols and some of the things we help our customers implement here at Sift, like with acronyms like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So it's really hard if you're a small business owner to stay abreast of the industry, think about all these attacks while you have a business to run. And then obviously the attacks change all the time. We all get a lot of email, right? We're all busy. We're reading email on our phones and our tablets. We might not be paying attention. And it really only takes, if you're quote unquote a defender against attacks, you have to be perfect all the time. But an attacker only has to, get lucky once, and then they're in your system. So.
Yeah, I think the number was, 2025 really saw the reverse trend of going from the big companies to going to the small businesses. I think the Insurance Information Institute, III, I think put it like 40-something% of all cyber attacks were actually against small businesses and not the large businesses, which is huge because everyone's using e-commerce. You now don't have to go through Amazon per se if you're having a small retail business. You can do it just at home through Shopify. Well, guess what? If you're collecting any of that stuff and not using a Shopify or some secure system, you're not only putting your own business at risk, you can get sued. It can be a real issue.
Yeah, it's like I see a lot of small businesses, where I live, accounting firms, small law offices. In particular, my experience, my brother-in-law runs a real estate company, and it's not a massive, operation. It's like maybe 75 to 100 local agents, but somebody impersonated his domain, got in the middle of a real estate transaction, was trying to get the buyer of a home to wire their earnest money, to somewhere else than, the title company. So that was kind of, one little example, but it's not like they were going to take a lot. It wasn't like, tens of thousands of dollars. It was like, maybe 25 or $5,000. So it wasn't like a massive score per se, but it was worth it enough for an attacker to take a crack at it. And then my brother-in-law operates a agricultural business. He exports feed commodities to Asia from the U.S. And I don't know, he has maybe 25 employees in his office, but somebody got access to his Microsoft 365 account, his calendar, more importantly. And then when he was on a plane one day, impersonated him to his CFO and said, "Hey, I'm on a plane," which he was, and then was able to get his CFO to wire money, offshore. So it's really, I mean, it is something that just requires vigilance, right? And I think it is worth, if you are a small business and looking at outsourcing your IT to a managed services provider, if it's not something you want to have, on staff, like an on staff. A lot of businesses can't afford, a full-time employee to do both IT and security, because they're kind of, and if you have a background in IT, it's not necessarily the same skill set or kind of background for cybersecurity versus IT and infrastructure. So it's a lot of times it's very specialized knowledge, and excuse me, it's easier to outsource that sometimes to somebody who makes it their bread and butter.
Oh, 100%. This stuff gets very complex very quickly, and you don't understand the risks that you have unless you have someone that can holistically look at it. Even if it's just you hire some guy just to get you started at least, to make sure you're going in the right direction. Maybe do an audit once in a while with them, because you don't want to be just doing this on your own. And especially so we will. This episode has all the big SEO catchwords here. We're going to talk about Iran a little later and some of the international impact and such that we have. But the other one is AI. I mean, that's the thing.
Yes.
That's so much of what's going on nowadays. And that must be a godsend for the criminals, is having resources like this.
It used to be like you could look at an email and be like, wow, that looks a little dodgy, maybe some misspellings, some typos, just kind of, something could appear off. Maybe a link or an attachment that you're not expecting. But today's attacks, yeah, you don't necessarily, if English is not your first language, you can always use the AI to generate a very realistic email copy. You can, a lot of attacks, the kind of the really kind of effective and tricky attacks would be ones where there isn't a link or attachment. It might be like, hey AJ, this is your buddy Brian. I'm stuck. Took a trip to Mexico, and I'm stuck in Puerto Vallarta, and need you to send me some money so I can get home. And if there's not that link or attachment to kind of to raise your awareness or your hackles, or if it looks legitimate, it looks like it's coming either from a real domain or potentially a good lookalike domain. But along with AI, I guess helping craft really effective emails, that aren't the old Nigerian print scams. Technology has made it easier just to phish people. So even before AI, you could go on the web and find web forms that would allow you to spoof various domains, and some of them still exist. So you go in, you say, hey, I'm instead of AJ at nh.gov, maybe I'm AJ at IBM.com, and send an email to somebody, impersonating a trusted domain. So you didn't need a ton of skill before. You could find these forms, but now you really don't need a lot of skill. You can use Claude Code, and you can code your agents to go do their bad things, right? While you're doing other things. So it really, I think it's always an arms race. Even before AI, it was always kind of an arms race. Like, attackers would try something new, companies would defend themselves against that. Attackers would try something different, companies would defend against that. And now I think with AI, just the time scales have increased. The attacks can change very fast, right? And it's just hard to keep up. So it really I know I'm kind of being all doom and gloom. The good news is, at least in one of the areas that we kind of focus on in email security, there at least is a fairly straightforward way to kind of shore up your defenses. So at least your real domains can be impersonated. So I'm very happy to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, that's really good because I mean that's one of the things where you got to be careful when you open an email, especially if it's a corporate email that you're operating within, because you see that at gmail.com. It's like, oh, that's weird. You see that a lot in some of the articles that were forwarded along to me. Is you see a lot in the insurance industry too, because they use a lot of contractors and things like that, and they're not necessarily full-time employees, so they don't have the at statefarm.com, whatever the company is they may be. They're using an at gmail.com, which means you could be giving your private information to someone that isn't necessarily for that company, or they are for that company. It's a Gmail they've used in the past, but it's been hacked a lot more effectively because they don't have that private domain that has all the IT infrastructure behind it to make sure it's operating securely.
Yep, and your expertise and background in insurance. We were talking a little bit about it before we went on the air about insurance claims. I mean, insurance brokers have a lot of information. They have confidential client data. They facilitate financial transactions. They communicate a lot with policyholders and vendors. Whether they're using a private domain for their business, or if they're using a mailbox provider like Gmail or all the others. Yeah, if you don't kind of just put basic protections in place, authentication, if you will, you can be spoofed. And I think a lot of times, at least for email, it's been around for so long that I think people just a little bit take it for granted, and they'll be like, hey, security's probably been figured out after all this time because email's been around, for like almost 50 years now. It's like, but the answer, I mean, the reality is no. It's kind of, email was designed before we had attackers. Email was designed for one-to-one correspondence, between government institutions and the military, educational institutions. It wasn't designed as the mass medium, broadcast vehicle it is today, if you will. So we're kind of trying to lock the barn door, after the horse has escaped. And in a way, we're kind of bolting on security to a protocol that's been around for decades, but it just wasn't designed with today's cloud world in mind, where we're all using all these cloud services, not just it's for email, but we're all using potentially like maybe we're using some sort of marketing tool or an HR tool or a payroll tool. All of these cloud services that sit somewhere outside of our premises, and but might still use our domain for email, and we just might not have any insight into all those different cloud services that are sending mail as our domain, and we may not know about attacks. We might see attacks that come inbound to our business, but we might not see attacks that maybe use our domain and try to target our customers, our partners and our supply chain. So yeah, email is not a solved problem, even though it's been around forever now.
And it legitimately just takes a single document to be emailed to someone for it to totally hose the an entire network, because it spreads so quickly. Because hey, guess what? You open that document, it hacks your email account, and now it's emailing everyone else in the building. If it just gets a couple others, it spreads like wildfire. It's you think of viral social networking. Guess what? That's what email-based viruses are, and a big deal, especially a couple of years ago. That's still a huge issue. Only there's a lot more ways to work around there. Or you get ransomware attacks and things of that nature. And people. Can you talk a little bit? What do you guys? How much of a threat are ransomware attacks still are in 2026? And obviously, like cyber liability insurance and things like that, people don't
Yeah.
realize now includes that as part of the coverage, is dealing with those sorts of things. What should you do if you do get in the middle of a ransomware attack?
Yeah, I think obviously the best time to have insurance is before an attack happens. But the next best time is after something happens. But yeah, we do see ransomware. It feels like you don't hear quite as much about it in news articles and such. Maybe it is because a lot of the ransomware attacks did rely on you to click an attachment or that would then spawn some sort of macro or code that would infect
Well,
your computer. So a lot of us,
back in the day, we
yeah.
used to email zip files. That was
Yeah, there
bad.
you go. Yeah. When's the last time you saw a zip file?
Oh gosh.
But I think what became maybe more effective for the attackers, rather than ransoming things and then requiring people to send in Bitcoin or whatever to release it, is it became more profitable to do kind of the business email compromise, the wire transfer fraud type of attacks where, hey, AJ, this is Brian. I'm your boss, but I need you. I'm not available right now, and I really need you to do this transaction right away. It's super important. With social, LinkedIn. A lot of us use LinkedIn for obviously legitimate business purposes, but it's very easy for an attacker to use LinkedIn to trace within an organization. Figure out the org chart and figure out connections within people. So we're all kind of wired, or at least I am wired to please, and like, hey, if you see a message that looks like it's from your boss or your CEO and they ask you to do something, a lot of times our default instinct, again, especially because a lot of us are so busy, is just kind of follow that direction, right? So I think back to kind of your point, cybersecurity insurance, ransomware. I think ransomware is just one of many kind of tools in the arsenal of the attacker these days. If you do apply for cybersecurity insurance, a lot of times you'll go through during the underwriting process. The insurer will check for some protections. In our space, it would be like, hey, checking to see if you have this email security protocol called DMARC implemented, because that stops your own domain from being impersonated. So that's one thing you can do to prevent attacks that spoof your own domain. But obviously, there's a whole host of other attack vectors. I would say that one of the most straightforward things to do in security, which is often a black box, is just check your email infrastructure and see, hey, or ask your managed service provider, or if you have an IT person on staff, ask that person, hey, what are we doing around email authentication? Which are these acronyms, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC? Being the most modern, but they're just ways for you to basically take responsibility for your email, and it tells a recipient of the message or a receiving mail gateway, hey, you can actually trust this message that claims to be from redsift.com or starbucks.com, because it authenticates properly as that domain. So it's a lot of times, if people have some security knowledge, they think about authentication in terms of authenticating their website and their endpoints and their devices and their users. But again, they kind of forget about email because it's been around and taken for granted.
So, looking at what's happening on the world stage the last few
Hmm.
years, you figure what happened with Ukraine, which is notorious for being one of the places where so many of the digital
Yes.
scammers be based out
Yes.
of, or at least having their VPN services based out of. With that going on, with the situation with the Israel-Palestine situation, maybe a little less of that, though there's hilarious intelligence gathering things that comes from Israel that maybe we'll talk about briefly from Stuxnet days. But
No.
when you look at what's going on right now with Iran, who has there's been a portion of what their global warfare is cyber and getting information, and
No.
vice versa. The United States trying to hack into their systems for decades on end around their nuclear
Yep.
infrastructure. As as business owners, as individuals in the United States, what sort of impact do these like global conflicts have on our security and making sure our economy isn't derailed because of infrastructure leaks and holes?
Yeah, before we went on the air, I just took a peek at the CISA website, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency for the federal government, just to see if they'd published anything new on Iran. They haven't yet. So their last advisory was from June of last year, where they just kind of mentioned that Iranian actors might target vulnerable U.S. infrastructure. So think like energy, water, other utilities. But now I think with kind of the conflict that we're looking at today, well, first of all, I would expect that guidance to be updated probably, if I had to guess, just given all of the physical attacks we've seen on U.S. Infrastructure and interests and service members. You would have to expect the same. We'll see the same thing in cyber as well. But I think just really generally speaking, when we're in kind of an era or a time of heightened geopolitical tensions, that institutions a lot of times, so think of our public utilities and our government agencies, a lot of times institutions are the first target. And certainly the attacks might come in two forms, which would be like, one is obtaining some sort of information, whether it be financial or personal, or some sort of service disruption, right? So we've seen that in Ukraine, where Russia has targeted both, with physical weapons and cyber weapons, critical infrastructure. I think this does a lot of things. One is if you disrupt infrastructure, that's obviously bad for the country that's being attacked. But it also has kind of an impact on financial markets, just kind of general, not necessarily customer trust, but kind of just the trust that citizens might have in their public institutions. And while we generally see it again attacking public infrastructure and government organizations first, a lot of times there's a long tail of attacks. So if, kind of different situation, but kind of in the U.S. elections, where it was determined that Russia had interfered in the elections, they were kind of going after small. It wasn't just kind of the presidential election. They were getting involved in smaller regional elections, state and local government elections. So the long tail was attacking smaller and smaller groups, and I think we can probably see that, or expect to see that with Iranian attacks. They're not just going to think about disrupting, large either enterprises or government agencies. Eventually, they're going to be very happy to attack the most vulnerable folks they can find, which could be, a small business. So
Yeah, 'cause
I
people think the big picture, like, oh, they're gonna take down our energy, they're gonna make the dams explode.
yeah,
Like, it comes down to a lot, especially when you're talking about the Iranian situation, where they're funding terrorists, which operate
yeah,
as mafiosos. Like, they literally
yeah,
are criminal enterprises that will take that information and then wash that money through various means or put it through crypto, things of that nature, and use
yeah,
it for terrorist organization work, in addition to what you would just think of as traditional crime or funding their
yeah.
government.
Yep. Yeah, I think yeah, it's not just the nation state act, it's not just North Korea and China and Russia, kind of organizationally, it's cyber criminals in those areas, like, yeah, just getting as much personal data as they can, publishing on the dark web or offering it for sale, on the dark web. They're very happy to do that. And back to your point about ransomware, still seeing some of those type of attacks where, hey, again, the bad guys only have to be right once, and not all of us, like, if you're a small business, you might not be running security awareness training, right? You may not have the time to put in place through something, phishing simulations and putting them through some sort of curriculum. So although if you do use a managed service provider, it's possible they do have some vendors that can help with that type of thing. But yeah, really, um, I think email in particular, because it's ubiquitous, and I'm an email guy, so I probably have kind of rose-colored glasses when it comes to email because I think that email is the biggest threat. But for most of the companies we work with, regardless of size, email still remains the primary threat vector because companies are shoring up their networks and their infrastructure and their devices. So the easiest way to get access to an organization is through people rather than machines. And the way you get access to people is via email usually. So I think it is still generally the biggest kind of attack vector that we still see, regardless of the vertical market the company's in, the size of the company, et cetera, or the location, not just folks in New England and the Northeast, but I think that goes without saying everywhere in the U.S. and globally as well.
And to wrap up here in the last few minutes, it'd be good to mention too that you don't know about a cyber attack when it's happening quite often. You find out about it months or years
Days,
later.
months,
There's always
yep.
these headlines like, "Oh, this major tech company had this attack that happened 6 months ago in the middle of the year, and why am I hearing about it in January?" It's because that's how long it takes sometimes to figure out something happened.
Yeah, that's right. It's not like the attacker's going to announce themselves. They might wait for the right time to pounce. They'll get in and move. Laterally within the organization potentially. If it's a large organization, they'll start with the person they got in the door with, and then work their way through other groups and folks, and they may wait some time to see if they're detected, and then exfil the data or whatever information they're trying to get. So you're exactly right. It's not like there won't be a big red blinking button probably that you're under attack of that you'll kind of get the fallout later, unless of course there's a ransomware attack where you can access any of your systems. But more than likely it'll be a little more subtle than that, and you'll have to deal with the fallout. So again, as given your background and companies I work with, the best time to have cybersecurity insurance or to get that is now before you have an issue.
Yeah, you can't buy, you're not allowed to buy insurance after you've already screwed up. It's a little too late. It's frowned upon.
No,
People don't want to pay.
true.
Companies don't want to cover you when you've already had a bad
No,
mistake.
it's true. It's true. It's just like with any other insurance, you might get for homeowners or your vehicle. Yeah, it's cybersecurity insurance you want to get before the attack.
All right, Brian Westnedge, Red Sift. Where should people go if they want to? Maybe where should they go if they want to stay up on what's going on and what you guys are up to at Red
Sure.
Sift?
Yeah, we publish a bunch of research reports. You may have seen some of it. We published something on the the insurance industry recently, where we looked at 50 large insurance companies to see if they were protected from email attacks, and the reality was about half of them weren't even protected. Very large insurance companies. So yeah, go to redsift.com, like sift flour, redsift.com, and you'll find research on pretty much any vertical industry you can think about. And then also check out if you're a small business, you're like, hey, where do I turn for any sort of cybersecurity need, regardless of whether it's email or something else. Check out your local managed service provider, managed security service provider. Often in certainly in New England and New Hampshire, there'll be plenty of these. But get somebody to help you makes it their business and something you can outsource, and it won't have to break the bank. A lot of these companies charge by the employee. So if you have 10 employees, they'll charge you a certain amount per employee per month to provide you IT and security. But it's almost always in my experience, worth it. And again, it's always more expensive to clean up after a data breach or an attack than it is to kind of prepare in advance for it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brian Westnedge of ResSift, for joining me today. This has been the New England Take. WKXL, thank you for picking up the show Saturdays, 8:30 a.m. Next up is Facing the Future over there. GraniteGrok.com every Saturday. We are posted on their site. And Concord TV for picking up the show. AJ at NewEnglandTake.com if you want to reach out and tell me what you think. Always looking to hear about that. Talk to you soon.